What if one day you wake up feeling unwell, but instead of going to a hospital to see the doctor, you simply grab your phone and talk to a doctor within minutes? It sounds a little unrealistic, right? But this is already happening today, and let's learn more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Med Talk. I'm your host Bihandu, and today we're diving into something that isn't much popular but rapidly changing healthcare, and it is telemedicine. Now, when we talk about emerging trends in IT, we usually think about things like artificial intelligence or cybersecurity. But telemedicine is just as important because it is not only about technology, it's about how that technology directly impacts people's lives. So, in this episode, I'll walk you through how telemedicine actually works, how it compares to traditional healthcare, and most importantly, whether it's really as effective as it sounds. Alright, you might be wondering, what exactly is telemedicine? In basic terms, telemedicine is healthcare delivered through digital technology. According to News Medical, it allows patients and doctors to communicate remotely using tools like video calls, mobile apps, and online platforms to diagnose and treat medical conditions. But there's a lot more happening behind the scenes. Researchers like Halim and others explain that telemedicine isn't just a video call, it is a whole system. It involves things like electronic health records, where your medical history is stored digitally, cloud computing to manage that data, and even wearable devices that can track things like your heart rate or blood sugar in real time. And it does not stop there. Latifi and colleagues point out that telemedicine can go beyond consultations. For example, doctors can analyze X-rays remotely. This is called teleradiology, or even assist in surgeries using robotic systems. So really, telemedicine is less of a single technology and more of a connected digital network that supports healthcare delivery. Now let's compare this to telemedicine and traditional healthcare systems. Normally, if you're sick, you go to a clinic or a hospital. You wait, you see a doctor in person, and you get treated. It's a system we are all familiar with, but it's not always efficient or accessible. Telemedicine changes that. Instead of traveling and waiting, you can connect with the doctor from home. And during COVID-19, this became especially important. In fact, Hollander and Carr, writing in the New England Journal of Medicine, argued that telemedicine played a critical role during the pandemic by allowing healthcare systems to continue operating while reducing physical contact. But here's the thing, telemedicine doesn't completely replace traditional healthcare. There are still situations where you need to be physically present, like surgeries or detailed physical examinations. So, instead of replacing traditional healthcare, telemedicine works alongside it. It's more like an extension, making healthcare more flexible rather than completely changing it. Now let's look into the benefits of telemedicine and why it's gaining so much attention. Well, first of all, it's accessibility. For people living in rural or remote areas, seeing a doctor isn't always easy. Halim and colleagues suggest that telemedicine helps solve this by removing distance as a barrier. Secondly, it improves efficiency. It means no travel, less waiting, and faster consultations. It saves time for both patients and doctors. and it can even reduce overcrowding in hospitals. And also, it costs much less, meaning it will save you a lot of money. According to the Indian Council of Medical Research, telemedicine can reduce healthcare expenses by cutting down on things like transport and hospital visits. And one benefit that's often overlooked is continuous monitoring. With wearable devices and remote tracking, doctors can keep an eye on patients over time instead of just seeing them during appointments. That means problems can be detected earlier, which can lead to better outcomes. So, overall, telemedicine isn't just convenient, it can actually improve how healthcare is delivered. Now let's look at the limitations and challenges of telemedicine. Well, of course, it's not perfect. One major issue is access to technology. Not everyone has a stable internet connection or the devices needed for telemedicine. So, while it improves access for some people, it can actually exclude others. There are also concerns about privacy. Halim and others highlight that medical data is sensitive, and when it's stored or shared digitally, there's always a risk of data breaches or cyber attacks. Another challenge is diagnosis. Without proper physical examinations, it can be harder for doctors to fully assess certain conditions. As Hollander and Carr point out, telemedicine is useful, but it can't completely replace in-person evaluation. And there's the human factor. Some patients, especially older individuals, may not feel comfortable using digital platforms, which can limit how effective telemedicine really is. So, while the benefits are clear, these challenges show that telemedicine still has limitations that needs to be addressed. Now let's look at the future of telemedicine and the ethical issues that it faces. Well, telemedicine is only going to grow. With technologies like artificial intelligence and data analytics, healthcare could be even more personalized. Latifi and colleagues predict that future systems will be able to analyze patient data more accurately and support better decision making. But with all this progress, ethical issues become more important. For example, privacy. How do we make sure the patient data is protected? The Indian telemedicine guidelines emphasize the need for strict regulations to maintain confidentiality and trust. There's also the issue of fairness. If telemedicine depends on the technology, well, what happens to people who doesn't have access to technology? And finally, accountability. If something happens or something goes wrong in a virtual consultations, who is responsible? These are complex questions, and they show that the future of telemedicine isn't just about innovation, but it is also about responsibility. And finally, telemedicine is more than just a trend. It's a major shift in how healthcare is delivered. It's powered by advancements in information and communication technology. It improves access, saves time, and introduces new possibilities for patient care. But at the same time, it brings challenges that can't be ignored. And maybe that's what makes it so interesting. Because the real question isn't just how telemedicine works, it's how far we're willing to take it. Will it simply support traditional healthcare or completely redefine it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our podcast, and thank you for listening to MedTalk. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.